This is quite a distinct honor that I'm now enjoying, speaking to the public in this splendid building and on a subject that has been given to me carte blanche. I understand from the doctor here present that I can talk about almost any subject that interests me, but I understand the public must be interested also. I have the inclination, however, to go back to my early boyhood. I go back as far as way along the early 50s. Doctor, I was born on the 17th day of January, 1846, and my father, he had been reading Roman history, I think, although he was quite a student in history generally. And he decided that Julius Caesar was a considerable a man. So hoping that I'd be somebody, why, he named me Julius, a name that I have never liked very much. And I didn't like Julius Caesar when I got up old enough to study his commentary. Well, he observed that I was born on Benjamin Franklin's natal day, the 17th day of January, only 140 years later. And thus he named me Franklin. Hence my name is Julius Franklin Howell. My first recollection of public living, and especially political living, as I may call it, was when I learned as a boy of 9 or 10 that my home was in the state of Virginia. I didn't know about states before that time. Time passed, and I remember distinctly the occasion when John Brown, the poor man, sought freedom for the slaves. Is there in my state? I heard about it pretty distinctly. I felt sorry, and yet sympathizing with my elders, I felt some resentment. Then came up the great struggle when the Republican Party had become a power in the land. In 1860, Mr. Lincoln was elected, as you know, and I remember that there was a good deal of excitement in my section that the Negro slavery would be interfered with. Negroes would be set free and all that. Well, I didn't feel much interest about it because I felt kindly toward the Dockers, and they were kindly toward me and toward my family. And when in the spring of 61, war was declared, about half of our pupils, young men over 18, quit school, joined companies of infantry, cavalry, and in their homes, in surrounding counties, and in that vicinity. I wanted to go too, but my father said, "Now, son, you're too young." I was just 15, just a little past. "If the war continues long enough, you may have an opportunity." Well, so I rested, and the war began, and I heard about it. And I heard that at the Battle of Williamsburg, some of my classmates fell in the battle there. Well, I grieved about that because they were boys that I'd been brought up with. They were a little older than I, but I felt sorry that they were killed. Then, in 62, although General Lee had still a pretty good army, he began to need more men, naturally. Although the big battles, or the largest battles, had not come yet. But my neighbors around there, some of them who were over 45, kinsmen of mine, some of them, began to get up a company of cavalry. And I, a boy of 16 and a half years old, joined the cavalry company, which afterwards was attached and counted with others among the 24th Virginia Cavalry. Now, for a long time then, from August 62 on, until 64. Great battles had been fought in there. We heard of the Battle of Gettysburg. In the spring of 64, our regiment was in the neighborhood of Petersburg. And while we were camped just north of Petersburg, General Grant began his invasion of that part of Virginia. We heard about it, and I remember very distinctly, one morning we heard that General Lee had crossed James up north and was coming down the Turnpike Road in the direction of Petersburg, just near us. The next morning, happening to look while I was on guard, across the James River, there we saw long lines of blue. The infantry of the Army and United States flags on the other side of the James, coming down to beyond the mouth of the Appomattox River that flows into the James, in order to cross on the pontoon bridges and thus begin the invasion of that part of Virginia. My regiment was moved north of Richmond, and thus we guarded that city for several months while General Lee and General Grant were struggling there near Petersburg. While that was going on, there were some skirmishes, and one, small battle I was in. I was not in any of the larger battles, probably fortunately, maybe unfortunately. General Ewell commanded the General Lee's corps near Richmond. And I remember we were called up one day and took the Darbytown Road, and some mile or two, I don't know, we never counted distances or time in those days. We turned off from the road, main road, and went down a road through a wood. After a while, came to an opening, and there was a line of blue boys and some artillery. And we charged them, and that's where I was struck the first and only time in my leg, which laid me up 2 months. I was sent home on furlough. We were around Richmond, my regiment was, all the time then, on doing little of nothing, while that war was still going on. A Saturday evening, the first day of April, 1865. We were ordered, and by the way, in the meantime, about half of my regiment had lost their horses. The Confederate soldiers owned their own horses, and when they lost a horse, it was difficult at that stage to secure a substitute. Anyhow, I lost mine. I've forgotten just now how. I don't believe it was in battle, however. Orders came for a dismounted part, or demounted, I might say, of the regiment to fall in line and march. We stopped on the way and spent the night. That was Saturday night. The next day was a beautiful day, Sunday. We didn't know what was going on. We were within a mile of Richmond, and there was a turmoil there. That day, the President Davis was attending his usual services at his church, St. Paul's Church. Right in the midst of the sermon, the front door opened, and a courier rushed in and went up to President Davis, handed him the paper. He opened it, and it was a dispatch from General Lee saying, "Mr. President, I am so heavily pressed by the enemy that I'm compelled to abandon Petersburg." Mr. Davis arose and left. The congregation broke up, and in a few minutes almost, there was pandemonium then in Richmond. We marched out of Richmond early the next morning, on the 3rd, and started in a southeasterly direction we were attempting, under General Ewell's command, to come in contact with General Lee somewhere down southwest of Petersburg. Well, the Federals under General Sheridan overtook us, our command of about 3,000 in Amelia County, Virginia, and after fighting several hours, why, General Ewell surrendered us, and thus I became a captive. I went to prison along with this command, and we landed in Point Lookout, Maryland, down here. And the day after we reached there, as a curious boy, I rose pretty early. We just gotten there the afternoon before. I rose pretty early and went out to see how things looked around in there. There were 20,000 of us, a large encampment. Well, there was a flagpole and a flag on it just rising. I stopped and looked at it with curiosity. It stopped when it got halfway. Well, I knew what halfway flag on a pole meant. For about an hour, the sergeant blew a bugle. We, 150 of my company, fell in, and as soon as he finished calling our names, a number of us rushed up and said, "Sergeant, what does the half flag mean?" His face fell. He says, "President Lincoln was shot last night." Well, the feeling, the variety of feeling that came over us 20,000 men in just that one. Of course, there were several other prisoners, as you know. But as for me, and a boy, just 19, I didn't know what to think. I couldn't feel any hatred toward Mr. Lincoln, especially. I didn't feel any special hatred toward any Federal soldier. Began to think how kindly General Grant afterwards, on the 9th, acted toward General Lee. I felt kindly toward him.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.